Okay, well, I'm gonna jump in. And we have quite a few slides, guys, today. I tried to cut it down, but I had a hard time keeping it in the time. But I'm gonna move kind of quickly through stuff today since I'm kind of short on time. I know I might be short on time. So yeah, that being said, flustered and short on time is a great combo. So I'm gonna just jump in, everybody. Let's do homework review. Let's see. Did anyone want to share about like anything from homework review? Like it was reviewing the 12-month calendar, which is on lesson 8's, what's it called? It's in the outline with lesson 8. And it's just kind of a generic calendar, but it's mostly just like any discrepancies that you noted or anything specifically with insects disease, IPM that you saw that might, you know, either be different or you were like, that's exactly what I would do. Or did anyone do the kind of alternative homework that I gave, which was looking up? I know a couple of you did because you sent it to me, but if anyone wants to share or note anything, please shout it out now. Anyone? Come on, guys.
I was going to say that I thought that, and I wrote this too when in my homework, I just thought that it was a bit simplistic as far as the IPM part of that calendar,
Yeah.
you know, yearly calendar. I thought, wow, I think there's a lot more to do. And then, as I had said, you know, once you get to know the garden, it's great for the beginning of the garden. But once you get to know the garden, you really kind of don't need to have that. I'm more of a intuitive sort of, I don't know, person. I go and I look. I just look all the time. So, you know, to me, I probably would not use that. I'm just saying for me.
Yeah.
But I don't run a business either.
Yeah, I totally,
you know, yeah. But I do have clients.
Fair. Fair enough. Yeah. I totally understand. Yeah, I remember your homework now, now that you're mentioning it. But yes, I agree. I actually struggle sometimes to stay to the calendars, especially because I think calendars can be helpful, especially when you're working with multiple people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally, as like the way I garden is, I try to do the intuitive thing. But I do think, I know someone from even the last class actually took that calendar and like fleshed it out to be, I guess, more helpful or more specific. And so she kind of used the same format and then customized it to the jobs that she knew she had that have high maintenance needs. I think especially with gardens that are kind of standard or maybe less maintenance, maybe it's not really necessary, but maybe on a more complicated situation, yeah. But a discrepancy could definitely be like, it's not actually useful for someone in the field. You know, for sure. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Or anyone who, not necessarily the calendar, like I said, anybody who looked up something they were curious about on UCIPM website, which is a fun rabbit hole to get down. I know somebody, I wish gosh, I don't have everything in front of me, but someone looked up the spittlebug.
Yeah, that was me too.
Yes. Okay, so you did both.
Yeah,
that was super interesting because I totally hadn't really looked into it, and I knew that the spittle-bugs did that like foam and it wasn't a really big deal, so I think that's why I just like ignored it. But it turns out the spittle-bug, the inside that like spit that you see on kind of susceptible plants is the actual larva instars, which is really cool, and I had no idea. But that was I'm gonna allow like what is
wow, you're breaking up, your voice is breaking up a lot.
Well,
about the homework.
Hi.
Well, I thought it was interesting that you guys actually say you can plant all through the year except for August and September. Mm.
I find the thing that's hard with, the thing that's challenging with natives is that when you do plant out of season, like out of, let's say, fall, which is the best time to do it, at least in my experience, it's a little bit difficult to balance when they're young plants and you've planted them maybe at another time. Its tolerance toward water, it needs water to get started, yet the temperatures might be hotter. And so to me, that's a real balancing act. And I guess just experience is probably, maybe the more you do it, the better you get at it, at planting out of the typical season. That's kind of been my experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some plants that want to be planted in the spring and summer, but from a retail perspective, a lot of people are afraid to plant other than in the fall, but people have to because of the MWD requirements to do it within 6 months or whatever.
Yeah,
it's just more work. It's definitely more work to plant them in the hotter seasons, but I definitely like the idea of don't plant in August and September. Like that seems like right on information to me.
Right.
But we definitely had this family that planted a whole acres of yard in July, and they lost less than 10% of their plants.
Oh, wow.
But they were very conscious of where was the water in their yard, where was this, it was definitely more work.
Right. Yeah.
Water is always the big issue. There's always going to be, plenty of sun for them to photosynthesize, and soil, obviously, and it's just the water that's a big issue. So I think Claire is coming back in. Oh gosh. Let's see who's here.
You.
There.
Hi.
Are you? Yay, Claire.
Heard one syllable.
Might be.
Oh, she's in a weird tunnel or something.
Yeah. So since we haven't done the land acknowledgement, let's give Claire a little bit of time to get that internet going. Let's do Jill. Jill, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you want to do a little informal land acknowledgement? Whose land
Oh,
to acknowledge?
you are putting me on the spot. And
100%, girlfriend.
I know, and I just so embarrassed to say that the Tongva are really where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that, as far as I know, is pretty much it in this little area.
Yeah. You're in Altadena, Pasadena, correct?
Yeah, I'm in South Pass.
Yeah. So I don't know if there was a village documented in South Pasadena. The closest village
I bet
may
not.
have been Cajamonga.
Yeah, I bet Cajamonga is it, because we're kind of out on the flat outer, I don't know. So I guess my acknowledgement would be to the Tongva and to the village of the Cajamonga
Okay. And that is good enough.
Good enough?
Thank you. It's just, land acknowledgements are a way to kind of, acknowledge the place that was. It's the history, and hopefully for some people that invokes a little bit more of a curiosity, provokes, I should say, more curiosity to keep digging, to look at the history of the place, because the history of the people and the plants are intertwined. Claire, we can see your screen.
Yeah.
Yay.
Brenda, can I ask you really quickly?
Yes.
I looked it up and I think I'm right, but I live at Stony Point in Chatsworth. And isn't
that might be Tatavian land?
I don't know how to pronounce it. Ashawanga was around Chatsworth, what I was reading a thing about, where I live.
So the land acknowledgements are working.
Yeah, and my daughter lives in New Mexico, so I'm always looking up tribes, and she does work with Native peoples because she works for the Department of Health. So She does a
Mhm.
lot of work with a lot of the pueblos and stuff around there. It was really interesting. So yeah, so I did look it up.
Yay, did you use the LA Times map?
You know what? I didn't write down my source. I wrote down
Okay.
what I found out, but I didn't write out what article it could have been just Chatsworth, Native history in Chatsworth. I forget exactly what I typed in, but
Well, as soon as as soon as Claire is back and everything, if I find the link to the map, I'll drop it in the chat so that
Oh,
everyone
okay.
can kind of have a resource to look up what all of the communities are, and some of them are still around us. Pacoima, Cucamonga,
Yeah.
Toluca, Jurupa. What else is out there that way?
You know, it's so fun.
Malibu.
Yeah, living here my whole life, I don't know anything different. And because nobody really talked about that, about natives when I was growing up, what do I know? Those are the names. They're like, yeah, I live near Toluca Lake. I live by Tahunga Wash, or what, you know.
Tahunga, Topanga. There you go.
Yeah,
Like
all
now
of
they're
it.
coming to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just because we were not told of that. You know, we were not told of that in the 60s. So
Yeah, and it's one of those things, I do nature walks here and there with other organizations, and I always bring up indigenous people, and someone asks, well, where do they live? And I'm like, well, in houses, and they have jobs, and they look just like all of us.
that's what I see. That's what
Because
I learned from my
that
daughter.
idea
Yeah.
of a native person walking around in feathers all day, that's a very plains Indian type thing, when in reality the clothing, the food, the use of the plants differs from region to region. So yeah, get to know your native culture, and again, the plants and the people are intertwined. And I think Amanda just dropped it in the chat, a really good LA Times map. Pardon me. So we're still no Claire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Emerson, are you there?
Hi, Brenda. Yeah, I'm
Hey,
here.
do you have do you have the presentation in English, or do you only have it in Spanish?
I have it in both, but I'm actually on my phone trying to watch the.
Oh, okay, because
Yeah.
I thought maybe we can get started. But okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. I guess we can. I do not have a copy of the presentation. What chapter are we doing today? We did irrigation
And I
pruning.
believe it is.
Pruning, yeah.
Pruning. So Emerson, you're on your phone. A few tips on pruning.
So there's different techniques that you guys are gonna talk about pruning. In English, I don't remember the names. I remember them in Spanish. I'm sure Claire's gonna tell you more about it. But one of the ones that I can remember off the top of my head, it's the pinching. The pinching that you can do with the cyanosas so that you can get more growth inside of the plant. If you have like a leggy plant, you can go and pinch the flower of a cyanosas, and you're gonna have more growth and inside of the plant. I'm sure Claire's gonna tell you more about that.
How is pinching different than deadheading?
I think deadheading it's more of a strong pruning, or of more of a big cutting than pinching, because when you're pinching, you're just pinching the flower, because when the flower of the plant starts coming out, there's a lot of energy that the plant is using to give you that flower. But when you pinch it and you stop that flowering process, you're gonna give more strength to the roots. Therefore, you have like a more fuller plant growth. Mm-hmm. Did her PowerPoint cancel a while ago, or?
She dropped. I don't know where she is. And I don't have a copy of the slides. Otherwise, I'd be, bringing it in so that between you and I, we can probably do the presentation. So a question in the chat: does it matter what time of year pinching should be done for ceanothus?
When it starts flowering, you want to do that when it flowers.
So in the middle of it being beautiful, you go in there and you say, not today. Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, before you get those beautiful flowers. I think once you start seeing that little new growth on the plant, which is gonna turn into flowers, that's when you go ahead and do that. You know what? I can probably try to find the PowerPoint on my email on my phone and send it to you.
Okay, and then I can share
Yeah,
screen.
give me 1
You
second.
can pinch hit for Claire, who has the answers. There's Claire, yay!
I'm back.
The team has the answers.
Guys, I'm at my neighbor's house. I'm not sure if I'm hoping this works. I'm wondering, I think I heard Emerson talking. Emerson,
Yeah.
I guess,
We were
worst case
talking
scenario,
about
if you
pinching.
can, yeah, and if maybe I can just call in if it keeps happening, and then Emerson can just pull up the shared document that we all have. But I will try to do it, because do I sound better now?
It
Yes.
sounds a lot better, yes. And
Okay, okay.
Did you go to the neighbor's house and say, hi, can I borrow a cup of internet?
I know. It was a very panicked, what's it called? Panicked request. I was like, hi.
Yes.
So anyway, so I'm in this kind of funny setup, but I will try to just jump into this class. We're just, let's see.
We
I'm
can
gonna
see
share
you,
my
we can see the
screen.
screen.
Oh,
We're
I'm
good.
gonna present. Okay. I'm so sorry, guys. I can't really help this, I guess. Okay. So I will just skip homework. We were talking about, okay, reasons to prune. And some of the reasons to prune would be rejuvenation. So this would be like stimulating new growth or just rejuvenating the plant in general. So that would be one of the reasons, rejuvenating it, and also removing any unproductive growth potentially. And another reason would be aesthetic. So aesthetics are just shaping, or aesthetics also kind of are called shaping. And most of shaping would be like redirecting growth. So that could be either like redirecting it to lateral growth or directing it to buds that you are cutting back to, or branches, buds or branches that you're cutting back to. So redirecting growth, but that also is just general kind of like shaping, like creating a hedge or creating a tree form or exposing a really attractive part of the plant and accentuating just like or potentially accentuating the natural growth habit. And then lastly, there's plant health, which plant health and aesthetics sometimes kind of combine together, but removing any dead, damaged, unsightly kind of parts or diseased parts, that's definitely plant health related, but also potentially improving air circulation in the plant, or compensating for overplanting. Those would be kind of plant health issues. And then clearly keeping branches and debris out of paths is kind of a standard part of native of garden maintenance. So that would definitely be a reason to prune. So ways to prune, I'm going to talk about some techniques for pruning. I don't have my little setup here, so I'm a little confused. But generally speaking, well, I guess I'll just, before I get into deadheading, something to just note about pruning is it's very general and not all the rules apply every time. And I'm going to try to give you some general rules so that you can have some kind of way of thinking about them, but many of them don't hold up and you can break the rules too. So anyway, so just kind of some general rules before I get into them is like nearly all native trees and shrubs can be pruned immediately or shortly after they've flowered, nearly all, but that's not always the case. Or maybe you don't want to, but it's just, it's possible to do. And then also you want to, a lot of times you want to prune when they're dormant or the slowest growing season for that plant. So that can also be a kind of general rule, but there can be exceptions to those. Like for example, with the pruning right after flowering, you might not want to do that in the case of something that is that like has a showy, that you want the showy fruit for, like a toyon or a seed head that you really like a Cercocarpus. The mountain mahogany has those wispy kind of seed heads. So pruning for those would be pruning those right after flowering would be problematic. So generalities, but I'm going to go over some techniques. One would be deadheading, and oh, my internet connection is unstable. I'm just going to kind of talk through that, and hopefully it sounds okay. So deadheading is just the removal of individual spent flowers or flower clusters before the seeds mature. So also the reason you would do this would be to either prolong the flowering season, and that's usually the case for annuals or non-woody perennials, or just to give it a more tidy kind of appearance. Not all plants can produce more flowers a second round, especially kind of our more woody ones. They typically need like a dormant season or something like that. But that being said, you can still do it for appearance, like here with this Eriogonum blisianum. It's pre and post deadheading, and you can see these ones, this brown flower clusters have not been removed yet, and then they've just been removed, and they've left the not yet flowering flower clusters. So these ones, they bloom late into the season. So usually you would be cutting back these seed heads in the winter or into spring. So just this one just gives a kind of more nice appearance. Here we have Salvia whirly blue, and this is also pre and post deadheading. You can see just all the dry seed heads on the salvia, and then on the right, they've just been removed. You're just removing it back to the seed head as far as it goes to, like its kind of origin point. And if you can leave the seed heads on as long as possible, it's better for the birds. So all those seeds in the seed head provide food for birds. So leaving them on is just a way to provide more food for, all those guys. So if that is the what's the word? If that, yes.
Can you, when you prune the seeds and stuff, what I've been telling people is to rub it together and throw it back in, like
Yes, so you could. I was just going to get to that point. I'm glad you brought it up. But you can cut them back and actually just drop them on the ground, and the seeds will kind of fall in place, and they also provide mulch eventually when the seed heads break down. Or yeah, you can smush them kind of to open it up so it's a little easier access. But eventually, they're going to get on the ground. So you can either leave them up there, because it's kind of like, especially for birds that aren't like towies that like to dig around the ground, they can kind of get up there and just go from the plant. So you can remove them. It's just totally up to the client. Like this is a kind of an example, the Encelia farinosa. It could be in need of some deadheading or not. It's really just about if you want that kind of habitat or not. Because also bugs and things kind of like live in these little crevices. So it is kind of about client preference in this case. And as long as you can leave them on, or just clip them and leave them on the ground for the birds to get down there. Deadheading, let's see, any other notes? Okay, so mowing would just be, yeah, you guys probably all know, using the lawnmower to cut down plants. Usually that's grasses. You can do it with some epilobiums, the California fuchsia, or Achillea, the yarrow, in like later in the season. The grasses, well, obviously when you mow it, it just gives that mowed look, that's kind of a manicured look, a specific, somebody wants an alternative lawn. This is definitely an option. I wanted to say, well, we'll get there at the next slide. This is Epilobium Burt's Bluff, and epilobiums and other kind of perennial herbs and rhizomatous shrubs. So those that grow by their rhizomes on the, kind of sideways through the soil. They tend to be invigorated by mowing. So they just get more growth. Or coppicing. Coppicing is just another word, but typically refers to mowing woody plants. So anyway, mowing kind of causes them to spread. And you can see in this photo here that this Burt's Bluff, after being fully cut back, it's pretty bare there, with a string trimmer, which essentially is a mower in a certain sense. A string trimmer is all you need for epilobiums because they have such thin little branches. Anyway, it's going to regrow. In a couple of weeks, it'll be back at full and lush. So that's a technique you can use for them. And then with grasses, grasses can be mowed regularly if you're using them as a lawn substitute, or seasonally if you're using it more as like a bunch grass. So typically with the grasses, you want to know whether you're working with cool season or warm season grasses, at least with the bunch grass. Oh, actually with the mowing too, but for the bunch grass case, in terms of when to prune them or when to mow them. Your cool season, the cool or warm season refers to the growing season, which means like mostly when they're greenest, when they're at their greenest, or when their seeds are going to germinate. So they, so yeah, that's what the cool and warm refers to. And typically the way I kind of think of it is you're going to cut them back before they kind of get started back up again. At least with the bunch grasses. So with the cool season grasses, you want to cut them in fall before the cool season starts. So knock them back. And then once the cool season starts, they can put on all that new growth. Whereas with the warm season grasses, you cut them later in winter and spring before the temperatures warm up, right before the temperatures warm up and they start to put on that new green growth. So that's the generality there with them. Here's a picture of a canyon prince, an Elmis canyon prince. And you can see on the left, it's before, and then the top two photos are kind of during, and then one's a close up and one's a further away. And then the other one is the after shot. And essentially, yeah, this has just been mowed. And you can see in the first one, it's just kind of getting dumpy and kind of like, that's once they start to kind of get like a lot of dead leaves in there and they start to be kind of floppy, kind of makes sense as to that's when you would just mow them back. So this is the case here. And with the canyon prince, it has the new growth is typically really green, and then it kind of turns bluish with the rising temperature. So that being said, I was just going to say about cool seasons. So some of our cool season grasses would be like the California fescue, purple needlegrass, Malika imperfecta is a really nice one for what's it called? Like a shady spot. It's a shady cool season grass. The Elmis plants. And then also our warm seasons would be things like deer grass or Sparabolus aeroides or Budaluas or maybe the purple threon. Yes. Therese, did you wanna?
I just have one question. Is the mowing or pruning back very drastically, is that supposed to mimic like a fire or being eaten by animals?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of. Oh, which you mean which or either or?
I'm just wondering, in other words, if it's in someone's front yard, so it's not going to be burnt, and if they don't have deer, it's like, is it just mimicking that part of nature? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's invigorating the growth with exactly, because at a certain point, there's just going to collect a lot of dead leaves and kind of get like a big dead leaf, kind of collection syndrome. So yeah, it does kind of create that new growth thing that animals would typically do, or fire.
Okay.
Good point. Thank you. Edging is another technique. This is just simply pruning ground covers back to the edge of a path, a sidewalk, any kind of hard edge. And it's really just to give it that neat appearance. Something like yarrow or like strawberries, like fragaria, that you could do with an edger or like a string trimmer, because they have that softer kind of perennial herbaceous kind of vegetation. And then ground covers that are a little bit tougher and woodier, like salvias, buckwheats, ceanothus, manzanita. Those ones, actually, I think the next picture, yes, like a ceanothus Yankee point, you actually want to cut back the stems unevenly into the main body of the plant to kind of create a more natural appearance. Because if you just string trim that, you would be cutting everything back to the same point, and you kind of create this dead zone. So like essentially it dies and then starts the new growth, and then you kind of create this lifting dead zone behind. So with those kind of more woody ones, you wouldn't use the string trimmer. I think actually in the photo before, that's a Baccharis pigeon point, you can string trim these guys every so now and then. They can take it, but they typically, with the woodier ones, you want to just cut them back.
Claire,
Okay, so
I'll just add with regards to that pigeon point, I did talk to Eric, who does a lot of groundskeeping at TPF, and I think he was directed by Tim for the pigeon point to, you know, as you were describing with the woodier plants, to cut back into the main body, because I guess, yeah, Baccharis can also,
it creates the dead zone, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So you just don't want to do it every time, especially with those woodier ones. I mean, if you're in a pinch one time, sure, but definitely, yeah, it does give it just a much nicer look to kind of alternate going in and out and just give it kind of that look. But thank you for that's awesome to have someone on hand who can just be like, I know exactly what happened in that photo. Thinning and lifting. Also, some people call this selective pruning, but thinning and lifting is just removing the entire stem or branch. And often this is done to create kind of an architectural look, especially on manzanitas, you know, to like remove branches that make it, so it looks more like a tree that's got that architectural tree form. But you definitely can use thinning also for like opening up the structure for air circulation or potentially light, creating a desired shape, removing any dead material, or for aesthetics or for fire safety for whatever reason. Removing crossed branches. You can also, let's see, any weak branches, or removing kind of really overly vigorous branches. But the point here is you're eliminating an entire branch, you know, either a stem or a branch, but you're eliminating it back to its point of origin. So I think I have a little, yes, I just kind of stole this picture from the internet. And essentially, I just wanted to kind of make a little point here. This is, so thinning and lifting is very much in the shaping category, but when you want to make sure you're cutting limbs. You can see here on the left that you leave the branch collar, which is kind of like the armpit shoulder sort of the tree. I think of it more as the armpit. And so with your pruners, you can just simply cut here. It would be really hard to cut like straight against the tree, but you definitely don't want to. With a bigger limb where you would need the pruning saw, like this here on the right, if it's a much bigger limb, you kind of do that 3-cut move, which is you do your first cut here outward from where you want your final cut to be, and then you do a second cut that removes the whole limb and the weight of the tree can fall down, and then you do this 3rd cut. And that's so that you don't risk, if I were to just cut it here first, potentially the weight of the limb would rip all this material, it'd swing down and rip it instead of actually having a nice clean cut. And we want clean cuts because a cleaner cut means it heals faster. And here in this like armpit zone, or this branch collar zone, I guess is the more official term, is all the cells that actually are required and needed, the meristem cells, to heal this wound. So you really want a nice clean cut, even if it's a large branch or a small branch. I see a hand up. We want to go ahead and shout it out. Okay, I will move ahead. No, no question. Let's see, we're still on thinning and lifting. I made my little points about that. Yeah, and also thinning, I kind of think of this in general is like kind of when the plant is more mature. Again, I'm talking in generalities all day today, but it's definitely kind of something you do more, as the plant is a little bit older, removing full branches or stems. But here is an instance of just Gambelia speciosa, where you see that dead branch here has been removed completely back to its point of origin. And that's it. That's a simple thinning or lifting move. Here is a Melosma laurina, the laurel sumac. And this also just removing entire branches to make space for the Hespero yucca whipplei, the chaparral yucca, which is here in front. You can't even see it in the first photo. But they're simply just kind of, whoever pruned this is just removing these all the way back to their origin. And laurel sumac kind of grows like a multi-trunked shrub. So yeah, you'd move, if you were thinning a branch, you just remove the thing completely. And that's clearly happened in this kind of U shape here to create space for that. So that's thinning, lifting. Oh, and here's a last photo of Sambucus, so elderberry. And this is just to clear the pathway. And it's kind of hard to see where they cut. Obviously, it's not easy. Hence why I say definitely go to the workshop if you can make it. Pruning is so much easier to understand in person. But here you can clearly see the pathway is much easier to see in the second photo. And I suspect maybe one of these hanging branches, they just cut all the way back to wherever its origin point was, or maybe wherever it forked or something like that. And so you can see that there's more clearance visually for the pathway. Another technique would be pinching. And pinching is just the removal of only the tips of stems of plants when new growth is coming on or right after flowering. So this is usually done to encourage fuller growth and typically to establish like a dense branching habit. And essentially that's because if you pinch where you pinch, the lower buds below are going along the branch are going to be encouraged to grow. So this person here, they pinch here, and ideally you want to pinch as close as possible to the next bud pair or the next branch. So here I would actually pinch more here. And then these buds along the branch below are going to start to grow out. So you especially want to do this early on with many of our young plants and perennials, especially with salvias, because salvias, if you just leave several different what's it called, branches or stems, just several of them, and they get really heavy with the new growth, they're at risk for crown splitting, so kind of just splitting down the middle with all that weight. So if you pinch them, they branch out and it kind of has more of a balanced and shorter growth habits so that it doesn't risk it for crown splitting. So that's something not just for looks in terms of the branching habit, but also for the like the health of the plant, so you don't risk it what's it called, crown splitting. Okay, so reduction cut or a heading cut. So these ones are as a little mouthful here, but I promise I'll explain it a little bit simpler. But it's cutting a terminal or leader branch or stem back to a lateral, which is usually terminal branch is just like any branch, that ends, it's going straight in one direction and has an end, to it. It's not branching. You're not cutting it at a branching point. You're going to the tip of a major branch or stem, and then you're cutting it back from there, typically to a branch that's a third of the size of that one you're cutting or more. So there's going to be pictures to explain this, but in a nutshell, this is just cutting a portion of the end of a branch. If it makes it more sense for people, you're just cutting just some portion of the end of a branch, but you want to make sure that it's what you're cutting it to. So the next branch you cut it back to is at least a third of that size or more, because if you cut it and it's a really big branch and there isn't, I'm going to try to use the shadow so you can see, but if you cut a really big wide branch and you just cut it back to like a little spindly little branch, you're probably going to encourage that water sprout effect, which is like a bunch of what's it called, branches, kind of sending out off of that point you cut. So here is a Prunus ilicifolia, and you can see it's a little hard to see because I know the background's not like perfect, but this one on the left is kind of this leaning form. You can see it's kind of leaning this way, and there's a bunch of branches up here. And it says here that they've been reduced to the lower laterals branches to balance out the shrub and put more energy into the weaker side of the plant. So it looks like they've cut these back to one of these or something like that. So it's a little less lopsided so that the tree can actually put more energy into these lateral going branches. So laterals doesn't mean perpendicular, it's just if a branch, it's just where it branches. So instead of having like that, the little, this perfect straight one going vertical, when you remove that, it encourages the growth to go to these lower branches. So those ones aren't going as vertical. So this is just helps. And also it's going to move more energy into the lower, remove it from that vertical motion of the growth of the tree. Also,
Claire,
just
we
with
have
reduction and heading cuts.
I'm sorry, Claire, we have a question in the chat. If your
Yeah.
salvia is full grown and you see evidence of cross branching and heavy branches, is it too late to save the salvia from crown splitting?
Good question. Definitely. Well, it depends seasonally wise, but also you don't want to cut into the woody part of salvias. So you could trim back like the tips and like kind of lose a little weight there. But yeah, you might not be able to lose a lot of weight by cutting back, a large portion of the branch. So maybe you would have to kind of tip into the newer growth, the more pliable, tender growth. So you might not be able to take as much weight off, but definitely I would to, prevent it. Definitely I would try to do it to prevent it, but don't go cutting into the harder wood. If you're really worried about it, then I would, like if you're seeing it already start to open, then I would maybe just remove it, like do a thinning cut and remove that almost all the way back. Yeah, that's what I would suggest. Let's see, what I was gonna say is you wanna really keep in mind with reduction cuts or heading cuts, the plant's shape, overall shape, and its growth habit. Like how does this plant normally grow? And really keep that in mind with reduction and heading cuts, because as the new growth emerges, it's always gonna go from right below where the plant was headed back to. So you really wanna be kind of conscious about your heading and reduction cuts and think about like, where am I sending energy to now, so just being really cognizant of that. And let's see, I think I had another, I think it's going to go to the next slide. It'll tell me. Yeah, so sorry, I'll just explain this. One of the benefits of reduction cuts is they create thicker growth, and well, they just stimulate, promote growth, but also promote thicker growth on branches and strengthening of branches, and also can potentially induce more lateral growth. What's another one? And just kind of generally stimulating growth in the direction of the bud or the branch that you're cutting back to. So that being said, here we're talking about cutting to a branch or stem that's a third of the size of the branch, what we were talking about. So here you can see this little point here is where the cut was made. And then these are laterals here that are being pointed to. I believe, so yeah, so you can see that this lateral is about a third of the size of this main stem, no smaller, so we ideally want to make sure you have at least that, you're cutting to something that's just at least a third of the size. One thing I would say, ideally you want to cut to the lateral pretty, like right to the lateral. I'm assuming this one coming out here starts at this point, because ideally if you were cutting to these laterals, you would cut it back to here. I hope that makes sense. You want to cut it clean. You don't want to leave this like kind of dead stick there that has no, if it has no laterals on it, has no extra branches. I'm assuming there's some branches here and that's why it was cut to that point. But I don't think we can see it from the photo very well. But that being said, you get the idea here. And I just want to also say, when you're cutting back, yeah, you want to cut back to the node or the bud or the branch. The node is just like the point where the branches come out. And you want to cut at a 45-degree angle. So this should be a nice 45-degree angle. You don't want it to be flat because you want it to shed water off of it to decrease fungal growth or whatever. And then also, say we were cutting back to this one, you would cut a 45-degree angle away from the kind of crotch, lovely terms, of the stem that's connected to, and that's so that it sheds water away from this little crotch area so that it doesn't get all fungally and gross there. Because if I were to cut it like this, at this angle, water is going to shed right into that little crotch zone. I have questions, hands raised. Go ahead, pipe it up.
I just want to be clear about when you say a third of the size, do you mean a third of the diameter?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Good point. Sorry about that. Definitely a third of the diameter. Thank you for clarifying. Jacob, did you have a question?
Yeah, so on that cut, we said the node. So I'm assuming that's where the other branches are coming off. So you cut just under where the branches are splitting out or above it. It looks like in the picture they cut just below it. So that's where those branches branching out. Is that correct?
Wait, in this picture, I see that it's well, I'm hoping, hopefully I'm answering your question. You want to cut right above it,
Okay.
and then the branch comes out right below. Because if you cut below it, you'd actually cut off the branch.
Got it.
So here, like, I'm gonna pretend like I wanted to cut it to this lateral that's coming off here.
Yes.
If I wanted to cut it there, I would cut it at a 45-degree angle like this, not down here, because then it would then this would fall off, right? So I want to encourage growth to this lateral, so I'm going to cut it here at this point. Did I answer your question?
Yes. I think that little leaf was blocking the branch.
I know it's bummer because this is, yeah, I don't think it's clear in this photo what's going on, but yes, yeah, that is what you ideally would want. Okay, so moving ahead. So yeah, heading back or reduction cuts. Oh, I didn't go with heading cuts or reduction cuts. Also, you'll hear people say heading back, like, oh, you could head back the whole shrub. And that's, again, just, removing a portion of the stems all the way back on the whole plant. So not just one, Andy, and you're heading it back the whole plant on all the stems of the plant. That's just the same cut style, just kind of a different way of saying it. Coppicing is another form of pruning. And this is the cutting of woody plants down to the ground or within 6 inches of the ground. And this is gonna, it's kind of like mowing, but it's for woody plants, and usually typically done with hand tools. And this is gonna reinvigorate older plants, and it produces a bunch of upright shoots after you do it. And so it's kind of mimicking the effect of a fire or a landslide, or potentially, like was brought up earlier, like a heavy herbivory event or something. But the idea here is typically these are with already established plants. This is not something you typically see you're doing every year. Some plants can handle it, but most of our woody plants can't handle coppicing every year. But that's just most of them, not all of them. So here, this picture, cutting of woody plants, you can see there's a salvia on the left and a baccharis on the right. And these were coppiced 4 months prior. And this photo was taken in March. And they've already bounced back quite a bit. And there's a lot of new vigorous growth on it. So this is something to reinvigorate the plant too, if you, it's getting older and you want, or if you want a different shape on it. I would ignore this kind of little, the words below on the little icon graphic below, but essentially you get the concept here. You have some kind of tree that is ready to be coppiced, you cut it all the way back, and then those shoots kind of come up, a lot of new growth, and it fills in. So it's definitely a technique used if you want to alter the shape of your already established plant, like a toyon, maybe if it's in a tree form and you want it to be more of like a shrub, that is a possibility. Encelia californica, you can do this. Well, we said California fuchsia, but it's not really a woody plant, but it's the same technique kind of. Western redbud, what else? Apricot mallow, the Sphaerolaceae, definitely you can do coppicing with. Matalia poppy is one. We have some examples down below of buckwheats, I said Western redbud, manzanitas and salvias also can be. But again, not something you do every single year in most cases.
Claire?
No.
Yes. Yeah, earlier you said not to cut into the woody part of the salvia, but then this one said, yes, you can if you coppice it.
Yeah, so for different, it's hard, but it depends on your goal. So you don't want to cut into woody salvia if you're just trying to get some weight off of it. But if I have a really old salvia that I want to reinvigorate and get like I said, a really old established one, you could potentially do it to it. But it's not these are just pruning techniques that you can use depending on the goal you have. And you don't have to use every one of them every time, and they're not exclusive to the plant types, if that makes sense. Did that answer it, or is it more confusing? I hope it's not more.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So shearing, you guys probably know this one. This is like standard kind of just pruning it into this formal sort of hedge look. And shearing is essentially just removing the outer layer of foliage, and it grows back kind of denser. And that plant, you're using the shears to do it. It said, typically it's just to create some kind of visual or physical barrier. Here it says it must be wider at the bottom than the top for light to reach all parts of the plant. It's not like a pyramid though, you know what I mean? I think it's something you kind of aim for. Just, I would say more so than having it wider at the bottom than the top, is just try not to let it get too top heavy and like floppy at the top. Because if that happens, potentially they start to shade the bottom and you'll create like dead space below or even in the center. So being sure to either keep like this one here more of a rounded top, so that light gets into all the areas like this salt bush, or like this Berberis navinii is getting pretty close to top heavy for my liking. It's getting a little hairy up there. And if this gets more heavy, it would start to flop over and kind of shade this bottom half and potentially kind of create like, the dead zones. So something you want to be careful with. Shearing, you do it, the shears, make sure they're really sharp when you do it. And, this is something you have to maintain like 2 to 3 times a year. You got to be doing that kind of shearing activity to make sure that you keep that hedge format. Not every plant can handle hedging or shearing. Here's I only noticed this like the other day, that it said it's a 75-year-old lemonade berry hedge, which is incredible, but a perfect example of like, a total substitute for something like Raphiolepis or something. And here's this lemonade berry just in a total hedge style. And then below is the Eriogonum Dana Point, also as a hedge, getting a little, like, it's not quite top heavy, but it might just be the flowering time. So there's flowers on it, so it looks a little heavy on the top, but it is still quite rounded, so that's good. And maybe once the flowering clusters are not there, it will look a little less top heavy. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's top heavy, but anyway, some other ones would be like a Howard McMinn manzanita. I wouldn't do it on any other manzanita, but Howard McMinn is pretty tolerable. Coyote brush, potentially. Yeah, coffee berries, lemonade berry. We have an example here. Potentially like a holly leaf cherry too, could probably handle a shearing. Oh, this is just a little photo. Shearing is essentially the use of like 100 little reduction cuts. Like I was saying, you're kind of doing an overall cutting back of the plant. And this is just to show the bud response. So you can kind of see, these are the little buds forming after it's been cut. This is not sheared. This is clearly a reduction cut because it's just one stem. But what's going to happen is it's going to have growth coming off of all these buds. And so it kind of stars out, like sprays out, as opposed to just having a one branch that has some leaves on it. So if you're going for that dense look of a hedge, then that's kind of the idea behind it. Okay, espaliering. This is essentially the training of a plant along a wall or a fence. This is a pretty heavy training kind of activity or pruning method, and pruning quite high in pruning as well. Like it's a little more maintenance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But this is, I guess, if someone wants to create like a focal point specifically or fit the plant into some kind of narrow space. Some of the plants that you could potentially, are potential candidates, because not all of them are gonna really like that really strict training, would be something like the flannel bush, the Fremonodendron, which is pictured here, Ceanothus, potentially Western redbud, manzanita. Also the vitis, the native grape. Grapes are, the vitis also would probably be pretty good for espaliering. Let's see where I'm at. It's 6, we could take a little break. Let's keep it short. Let's just go, let's just do like a little 3-minute break. We'll do at 6:05, come back and we'll kind of get into the seasons of pruning and whatnot. So 6:05, we'll be back. Not much time, guys. see if I can-
Henry Bursalis, if you're there, if you can hear me, I need to know what name you registered in the class under, because I don't have you on the roster and I was taking roll. Thank you.
think I am. Getting situated, guys.
Can I ask you a question? This is Lupe.
Oh, is there anything in the chat that I should check?
No, it was just, it was off the topic, so I didn't want to do it, but it has to do with mulch. It has to do with my inability to decide which is the best mulch. A lot of the times when I read at the ingredients, they seem to be not natural, and they paint the mulch to look red. So do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, you want to avoid those bagged mulches that have paint on them. You can, you want like shredded natural materials. Typically, because especially if you're doing like a turf replacement rebate program, you need quite a few yards to
Right.
apply enough. There's a couple different, there's like Chip Drop, which is like a free service thing, but there's also Whittier, what's it called? Whittier something company, but also there's Soils Direct. All of their mulches are going, or most of their mulches are going to be all like natural, just shredded bits of wood. If you're going for the wood ones, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rock ones shouldn't have any kind of chemical or anything added to them or
Yeah,
paint on
I
them.
like the wood.
But yeah,
cut.
those ones at Home Depot that are painted,
Uh-huh.
yeah, though, because typically, if you're buying, if you want 3 inches of mulch, or if you're to get 3 inches of mulch, you need quite a few yards. So buying bagged is actually less cost effective. So you normally have to go with some kind of like a Soils Direct or Whittier. It's like Waste Halt something. Anyway, they offer in larger quantities. You can buy it in yards and then they deliver it. So those ones I think
see.
are a better bet. Yeah,
Okay,
for
well,
sure.
that's good feedback. I love it. So
You can also use the cut and drop
Good, I'm glad.
method, right? Is that what it's called, Claire? The cut and drop, where you
Yes.
cut and drop it directly from whatever it is you're pruning. And turn it
Yeah,
into
so
mulch.
whatever you prune off of, you can just chop it into little pieces. Yeah, absolutely.
I see. Yeah.
If
I
you need a
do-
lot of material, obviously you probably have to
Right.
for it, but
Yeah. but-
otherwise you can, yeah. definitely.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. I appreciate the tip.
Also, if there's any wood material on your property or a property that you're looking at, don't take it anywhere else. Have it there, chip it there, and use it as mulch for your own garden. Recycle what you're already using or what you're
Mhm.
trying to get rid of.
Right. Because
Yeah.
I do some composting in the back, but it's just not enough. And that usually ends up in my plants anyhow, not so much for mulch. So, I wonder what would be your opinions on that? And I appreciate you giving it to me. I really do.
If you live in the city of LA, a lot of times the sanitation yard.
Yeah,
I've kind of wondered, I've been told that those are slush from human waste. Is that true?
No, when I worked at other projects where we had to be really cost conscious, we would use mulch from the city to do city projects. It is mulch that is cut down from city trees and other public places. So there are palm fronds, there are pine needles. It's not straight wood. It's effective. It comes in 2 grades, coarse cut or fine cut. And the fine cut is more like a fertilizer. So if you opt to use the free city mulch, go for the coarse cut, but be aware that it is going to have pine and palm and seeds from other invasives. It's not a bad thing if you're really working on a budget. It's going to break down anyway, and you can get excuse me, better grade mulch.
Okay.
When you save up the money. But again, if someone is cutting down a tree next door, if you're chopping wood, chip it and use it where you are.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump into seasons to prune and work through some of these. This is another very general thing and doesn't really fit all the rules. Like the plants don't read the books, guys. They don't necessarily follow the rules that we have created. So sometimes, you know, they're a lot more dynamic than we kind of want them to be for categorizing. So take some of this with a grain of salt and that it doesn't always apply. So seasons to prune, let's see. I think I just go, yeah, pruning. Oh, it says pruning is seasonal depending on plant type and growing season. So yeah, this is not going to be, it's not the same for each plant. It really does depend on each plant. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but generally speaking, it's kind of like shortly after they flower, you can prune them, or during their kind of slowest growing period, or when they're dormant. That's kind of general rules of thumb, but doesn't always work. Just want you guys to have kind of the like rule of thumb. Most of them will fall into that category. So with ground covers, as with all pruning, depends on the species, but generally it's after flowering or prior to new vegetative growth. And really with ground covers, I think the biggest concern is edging, and you can kind of edge any time of year to clean up the paths. That's not, because it's just kind of cleanup of the edges. The rest of the plant should be fine. So ground covers you can do kind of all year long. Conifers are any time of year, really. If you want to do shaping of it, you might want to do it after the new needles harden off. And then there's examples of some conifers like incense cedar, California juniper, and pinyon pine. Typically, you're not needing to do a lot of, like with California juniper, it'd be like light pruning. Pinyon pine, not a whole lot of pruning can think of. You know, this is just if you need to. With conifers, they really need unobstructed space around them. They can get dieback when they are shaded or touching with their neighbors. So that would be what you might be controlling for with conifers. Yeah. So I have semi-evergreen species. These are basically species that are green they're green most of the year, but under certain conditions they go dormant. And this is a really big category, but basically during the period of slowest or no growth is when you would want to prune any semi-evergreen species. And typically that's before where we anticipate rain coming, so like fallish, you know, or right before winter. But again, it's just typically, generally, I mean, it's almost not helpful, I understand, but either way, it's just kind of to lump them into different categories. So something like Matalia poppy, shrubby monkey flowers, goldenrods, irises, sages. Also, you would want to be doing it when they have their slowest growth. Let's see if there's any, yeah, some of these are really obviously go dormant, like an iris, and others not so much. So it's a balance. And in different gardens, they'll behave differently too, guys. So like, you know, if it's in full sun, not getting watered, maybe it definitely goes dormant. Another time in a different garden on the coast, it doesn't go dormant at all. So again, the rules don't always work for every little thing. But the next category is like evergreen, herbaceous perennials, and shrubs, which is like so many plants. But these generally you shape after flowering and rejuvenate in fall. So if you're doing any like coppicing or something, do that in fall. And the light shaping you can do after it's flowered. A lot of things fall into this category, like coast aster, toyons, coyote brush, coffeeberry, ceanothus, manzanitas. We got laurel sumac, lemonade berry, mountain mahogany. This is the general rule. The exception, though, here in the pictures, I believe, is here this toyon. If I were to shape it after flowering, I wouldn't get the berries because it goes flower, fruit, seed, right? You know, like it flowers, it gets fertilized, and then the seed's produced either in a fruit or in an inconspicuous fruit, or not fruit. Anyway, if I were to remove the flowers on the toyon, right after flowering, then I would sacrifice the fruit that's supposed to come. So if you have a client who's like, I really want bird food or berries and things like that in my garden, then you wouldn't be doing that shaping after flowering. So you would, again, it's like the right plant for the right place, not just in terms of soil, but also, is this the right choice for this client? So keeping all those things in mind. And then I believe this photo in the background is Cercocarpus, which is the mountain mahogany. I can't really tell from the photo, but I'm going to pretend it is, because also mountain mahogany would be an exception to this rule, because they have these lovely like wispy seed heads that are very showy. And you want to have that. That's a cool part of the plant. That's a cool feature. And so if I were to shape it after flowering and maybe remove all of those flowers, I wouldn't give it time to develop the seed, which is the kind of cool part of the plant. So just again, I want to highlight the what's it called? The things that don't follow the rules. Here is a difference between a salvia pruned in fall versus not pruned at all. So the bush on the left was headed back entirely in November and December. This photo was also taken in March sometime. So you can see on the left, it's got plenty of new regrowth, a lot of green new tips. It was headed back. Typically with salvia, no, this is just a salvia, but with like a salvia clevelandii, you can cut it back almost like 30 to even 50%, depending on the plant. But so this was probably headed back at least 30%, if not maybe more, and back in December, and you can see a lot of new growth. So on the right, though, is one that wasn't pruned. So you can do either or, kind of going back to what someone was saying before. It's like, it really depends, what are you looking for? This one on the right is a great habitat for birds, especially little towhees that go under it, and quail. So it's just kind of, what are we looking for? What does the garden want? The one on the right is not bad in any way. It has a lot of seed heads on it. So potentially better wildlife habitat, but it doesn't have as much kind of green, new, vigorous growth. Or maybe it's not obvious, but the green is a little bit greener on the left-hand side. So it's just kind of a little less robust in terms of new growth, the one on the right. So that's kind of a, which option to do. What not to do would be making excessive heading cuts on any excessive heading cuts. So doing a lot of excessive or heading cuts regularly is actually going to de-invigorate the plant. So heading cuts can, help invigorate, stimulate growth into the buds behind where you cut it back to. But doing it all too often, you have to think the plant doesn't have energy to continue to regrow things. It's kind of, so anyway, that's essentially, excessive heading cuts can be problematic. Another thing to not do would be pruning right before it's flowering, or even during its flowering, because essentially you just lose the flowers. And a lot of the highlight of our native plants is their flowers and them blooming. Lastly, what not to do would be repeatedly pruning for size control. This is better managed by replacing with a smaller variety. So yeah, if you are going back every time you go to the garden, you have to like prune it back for size, then that's when I would suspect like maybe this isn't the right plant for this space. So yeah, again, picking the right plant, the right size for the space allotted. Here is a Ceanothus Joyce Coulter that was sheared during bloom. You can see on the left-hand side, there's a few blooms that made it that didn't get sheared. And yeah, you lose all the Ceanothus blooms. Like that's kind of the like highlight, and then yeah, the plant, and also you lose whatever, whatever the bees and the pollinators that get to use those blooms. So kind of, a bummer if you do it during or right before they flower, because then they don't have that season. Of course, the next season they will flower again, but you don't want to keep making the same mistake. This plant might be too big for the spot as well. So here's a Salvia clevelandii that's turned into this columnar thing. This is a not to do thing. I mean, when I look at this, I think like, okay, there's probably not enough air circulation in the center, maybe not enough light. So you might be creating kind of poor conditions for the plant to where it wouldn't, you're affecting the plant health. And then also it doesn't really look that good. You know what I mean? It looks like somebody's been shearing this one, which is not typically, not, at least not for Salvia clevelandii. It's not typically a pruning method we use with a Salvia clevelandii, you know. So this is just probably either, yeah, like somebody trying to just shear this thing, or making same thing, making excessive heading cuts. They're kind of the same end result. I'm going to skip the exercise for now because we had some time issue things. Thanks to my internet stuff, but I'll just go into tools. We can come back to the exercise if it makes sense. Okay, keeping your tools sharp is really important. Obviously, like quality tools, if you can get them. If not, make sure they're really sharp. Sharper means a cleaner cut. So the cleaner the cut, the less, the cleaner the cut, the faster it heals, because you're affecting fewer cells of the plant. You're just doing a nice clean cut, and then just the ones that were affected can essentially heal more quickly. So it's not just for like making it easier on your hand or whatever. Duller tools or blades tend to kind of do like a crushing action because they're not cutting very well. So they actually kind of crush the cells around, and that actually makes it slower for it to heal. So sharp tools, good call. Should go without saying, but like, you know, of course, use the tools safely, and then use hand tools as much as you can, like where it's appropriate. Using hand tools over power tools, it really allows for kind of closer observation of the plant, right? If you're really in it, you can see what's going on, any health issues, things like that. So it's recommended. It definitely depends on your situation, of course, but as much as you can. In terms of hygiene, hygiene is really critical. We talked last class about how a lot of natives are susceptible to fungal, viral, bacterial stuff. And one way we can spread it is through our tools when we're pruning. So making sure that we aren't spreading those diseases, especially when working with a diseased plant. Like if you're pruning, you might want to be cleaning between cuts if you're pruning a diseased plant, or pruning off diseased plant vegetation or material. Definitely in the same garden, between plants, if you're working with diseased plants in the same garden, make sure that you're cleaning between cuts. And actually, they really suggest you clean between sites even whether or not you're using diseased, if you know you're working with diseased material, because you might have Phytophthora in the soil in one site and be digging up in that site and then move to another one with the same shovel and not think that it's a problem, but in that other garden, the conditions are not as good and the Phytophthora thrives or something. So even cleaning your shovels and rakes and stuff is really recommended. With your tools, specifically for pruning, you want to sterilize them with some kind of disinfectant solution. This could be Lysol. It can be bleach. Bleach does, over time, it will destroy your tools. You know, it's like oxidizing them, or maybe somebody who's better with physics, but it does over time kind of mess up your tools. But if you were to use bleach, you want, like, of course, like a 9-to-1, some kind of, everybody probably knows this after COVID, but like, you know, you don't want just straight bleach, you know, some kind of 9 parts water to 1 part bleach. And also I've seen people do like rubbing alcohol and then a torch. You know, you can use a torch to disinfect your blade or tools. Definitely, but definitely hygiene is important. There are like a bajillion slides on tools. I'm just going to go through some of my faves, or some of the ones I think are the important ones for pruning. And I guess if you guys really want to see the names on them, if you're not familiar, which I'm assuming a lot of you are, you'll just have to pause on the record, or on the what's it called? Yeah, the re-recorded one. But some of the top ones, I would definitely say having bypass pruners. These are this type of pruner. Obviously, this is for kind of branches that are smaller than like a 1/4 inch in diameter, something like that. You know, you don't have to measure it, but obviously smaller little branches. I highly recommend bypass pruners over something like an anvil pruner. You might want to Google image anvil pruner if you're not familiar, but the bypass pruners work like scissors. So it's like, it's 2 blades passing by one another. So it's a nice cleaner cut. Again, we want that clean cut. And then the anvil pruner is more like a knife on a cutting board. So you typically, you actually kind of are more at risk for doing that crushing motion, right? Because it's basically a blade hitting like a little stopper. So you're more likely to do the crushing thing than the nice clean cut thing. So definitely lean towards bypass pruners if you're doing a lot of pruning. And anvil pruners are mostly for like dead wood, twigs and things. They probably make more sense for that. Hedging shears or hedge shears. these are for hedging. I mean, yeah, I'm sure you've seen them. Loppers would be for the larger branches that are like, you know, up to like 3/4 inch in diameter. This would be what you'd be cutting with. This is a handsaw or a pruning saw. This picture, I feel like, doesn't do it justice. It almost looks like a little butter knife or something, like a little steak knife or something. A pruning saw, I hope you've seen or Google it to get a better picture, but it has the kind of, you know, it's usually this curved blade. It looks like this, but it's kind of usually like kind of, you see the wooden handle ones, and they're usually like, you know, 8 inches to, you know, somewhere 8 to 10 inches. And these are for the bigger branches that you don't have. Actually, there was a picture in a slide back where I had that image of the when you're cutting a lot heavier branch. Anyway, either way, the handsaw is for the larger branches, and yeah, I think you got that right. Yeah, tons of pictures. I'm telling you, this is just the long version of it. If something's high to reach, pruners. Same with the pole saw or pole pruner combo. If it's something high up, the telescopic ones. I'm going to move through these. Oh, the collinear hose, the one in the middle. This was the one I was talking about in the weeding portion. It's a very shallow cultivation, not cultivation, but a shallow way to remove new germinating weeds. And whereas the standard hoe on the right, you're really kind of breaking up the soil and disturbing it much more. So if you want to use a tool, I suggest this collinear hoe. The hula hoes also kind of are a little more disruptive than the collinear hoe, but you can do it sort of shallowly if you got the technique, I suppose. Rakes, you guys got to know those already. Spades, these are all the things. Like I said, just pause on the video of the re-record if you really don't know the names and you want to be reminded of them. Oh, Hori Horis, love this tool. I like buy this tool from friends for Christmas gifts and things like as gifts for like gardener friends. I think this is a really helpful tool. It's lovely for planting like little 4-inch pots or even a 1 gallon. This is a great little tool. I know it looks like Rambo style crazy. It's got a nice heavy weight to it, and you can divide plants also with it. Anyway, it doesn't always have to be this sharp. Sometimes they come a little bit duller. I kind of like the duller one better. But anyway, just like a fave, a hori hori. I'm gonna skip these guys. Sorry, dudes.
While
well,
you're
I should
skipping,
stop on here
Claire,
because
we missed a question in chat about watering. Will overwatering some natives encourage fast growth in plants, then eventually plant death?
that will eventually, what was the last part?
Too much water to make it grow fast, but then it will eventually die, question mark?
Yes, that is definitely something that happens with natives. I've seen that happen where, yeah, overwatering just so, you know, they put on, basically it's almost like you speed up their lifetime, you know, it's like they'll live fast, die young, you know, they kind of have a lot of growth and they're big and bushy and they shorten their lifespan. So I've seen that happen with salvias particularly, but definitely, yeah, overwatering can kind of create too much, not too much, but create, yeah, like kind of excessive growth. Also, I mean, the bad part is potentially disease. But if it's not disease and it's just kind of growing really robustly and big with all that extra water and it's taking it up, sometimes it can shorten its lifespan for sure. Soil probe, we kind of talked about it in the irrigation class. So if you've never seen one, they look like that. And the irrigation adjustment tools, they basically, you put them on the, you can stick them into the pop-up or the irrigation head and change the flow or spread of a sprinkler. So if you ever wondered what those are or don't know about them. And then the dram watering nozzle wand. Well, the watering nozzle is just the part at the end, but with the wand is the whole stick if you want to have that. But dram watering nozzles / wands are kind of like the go-to industry native plant watering hose. Essentially, they just have a really nice, gentle kind of rain watering feel. I don't know. Anyway, so that's kind of the standard for those. It has, yeah, like I said, just a really nice, even spray and really nice, gentle watering. So those are some of the tools. Let me see where I'm at. Yeah, okay, I want to go through this. We're gonna, if you guys have your workbook, I really suggest having it out. I'm gonna go over it because I think this resource is so damn cool. And I really want to showcase it more than I do even the next slides. But If you want to go to a page, it starts on page 97, is your California native plant maintenance data sheet. If you want to just go there and kind of get ready, we'll kind of go over some of these things. I'm sorry, this data sheet. But just to start, we're going to go through kind of some of the common plants, well, like genus, geni, plural genuses. Anyway, we'll go through some of those, and I want to kind of combine what's in the maintenance data sheet because it's such a great resource, and I want to just encourage you guys to use the resource. So here we have a slide on Manzanita, or if you guys remember from Plant ID, that would be Arctostaphylos, the genus name, scientific name. So it's just asking, you know, what are some of the reasons to prune? Okay, it would be like aesthetics, like shaping and revealing those like really iconic branches. The season here says early spring, before new flower buds form. And it's, well, actually, let's just go to straight to, if you go to page 113, that's where Arctostaphylos is on this California native plant maintenance data sheet. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it looks like this. It's got a lot of information. It's basically like a giant Excel sheet that's been printed out, or in digital form if you're looking at the digital one. But I want to walk you guys through it because there's so much information here, and it's almost like a lot of the pruning stuff is in here. So if you're like not able to memorize this, or you're like, this is too much, you have all this information right here that's just in this nice little presentable data sheet. So if you go to Arctostaphylos, you'll see there's the plant type, the genus, and the species, which there's many of, and then the common name. And just so you know, there's basically 4 pages to each row, because this is like, if it were an Excel sheet, it'd keep going like this, but we had to break it up for pages. So there's 4 pages for each kind of entry, let's say. And why I like this is because there's the common pruning methods associated with this plant. So if you're like, I'm not sure, it's like a good hint. So here in Arctostaphylos, if you read, there's also this description that has basically like everything in a nutshell about this plant, or like the kind of important takeaways about the plant. So here, if I read, I'm going to read out loud, that's annoying, but about Arctostaphylos, which says, thin the branches to create an open look, or tip frequently in years 1 through 5 for a dense hedge. So there you go. If you want a dense hedge in the first couple, establishing years, you want to be tipping frequently. And if you want to create an open look, more like a tree, you want to thin the branches. So there's already some tips about pruning. Then it says, manzanitas periodically get galls in the summer, which typically fall off by themselves by fall. By summer, manzanitas have usually already set buds for next year's winter flowers. So time your pruning for spring after they've flowered and set berries, but before they set next year's buds. That might sound really confusing, but essentially, manzanita's like iconic kind of twisted growth habit is because of the way they flower. Essentially, each flower cluster, so say this is a stem, each flower cluster terminates the growth of a shoot or stem. So where it flowers is where it stops growing. And then the buds behind it are where it starts to grow, and the stems don't continue along that same line. So if I'm getting like a new bud, the flowers ended here, and then it starts to grow in a different direction, say, basically it's going to continue growing like that. And then sometime in summer, like May, July, well, yeah, more like July, it starts to set the flower buds for next year's flowers. So it just means they set them. It just means they're kind of like on pause. So I need to make sure if I'm pruning before they set those buds. So when it's in the process of growing those bottom ones, I can cut it then, so sometime in spring, early spring. But if I cut it in summer, I'm going to cut the buds off that have already set, and they only set once for manzanitas, or once a year. I should say. It's not like it's over if you don't do it. It's not over forever, but once they set, if I cut them off, then the tree's like, I'm not going to flower next year until the next time I set buds again. So that's kind of part of the like iconic, weird twisting form, but also informative for pruning. So with pruning, we would want to be doing that tip pinching in early spring before they set their new flower buds. So tip pinching, or any kind of shaping you would do then. It says here, special considerations, prune when it's hot and dry to limit spread of disease. We will get there on the data sheet. I'll show you, if you keep going on the data sheet, we'll look at the Arctostaphylos entry. It says right after description box, it says the pruning season, and it says spring or summer. So summer would be more for like dead wood and twigs, because that happens naturally on manzanitas. So anything dead and stuff you would do when it's hot and dry, which would be summer. The next category on your maintenance sheet tells you, the next three is basically if it's evergreen, if it's summer dormant or winter dormant, and there's a little X for what it belongs to. So manzanita is evergreen. Then you go to the next page, which would be 114 for to continue with Arctostaphylos. And you can see that the next two columns, which I think is really helpful for the rebate class, which it says works well with LADWP irrigation regulations. So with the irrigation guidelines that they have set forth, these are our plants that have been designated as good for working with that. Here in the case of Arctostaphylos, it's not checked, so they don't consider that one. And then the preferred plant for swales is the next column. So this is great. Like, this is what I was talking about, I think, with the rain garden slide a while back. It's going to tell you which plants are best for those rain gardens or swales, which are subject to kind of like occasional flooding. So this is a great resource. If you're thinking about something to plant in the bottom of your swale, look it up in here and be like, is it a good one? It's whether or not it's checked or not. Then you keep going. It says your preferred mulch type. So whether it's organic or inorganic, and many of them are either, so you can use either for them, like Arctostaphylos. And then there's this kind of interesting column called replacement value is the next one. And it says the intervals in years something could be replaced or coppiced. So depending on if it is a plant that takes coppicing well, is what you're kind of using this time frame as. It's kind of like the lifespan, but also kind of like the aesthetic lifespan. So this might be when the plant starts to kind of go downhill in terms of production of flowers or vegetative growth. So you might want to coppice it at that point if it's capable of it. We'll get to that in this chart. Or it could potentially mean like that's kind of its lifespan, you have to replace it. Some of the shorter perennials you'll see are like 3 to 5 years. So you can think about it in terms of like, oh, this might not last that long. This is just a range, I think, to kind of keep you thinking in that way. But of course, there's like the example of the lemonade berry that's 75 years old. So these don't necessarily, again, the plants don't read the books, or read these charts. So they kind of do their own thing. I just want to keep going because we're going to get to the pruning part, I swear, which is if you keep moving along in the chart, there's the difficult to establish. It says yes for manzanita. The flowering season, it says summer water needs. So it's low, medium, high. This one is considered low. Of course, manzanita doesn't really want a lot of summer water. And then we get to finally the different pruning methods that are kind of typical or common with this plant. So again, I think this is helpful if you just need a cheat sheet. And here it says Arctostaphylos, early tip pinching, thinning, yes. Deadheading, not really, because you're not really removing the dead spent flowers on a manzanita because you're letting them fruit and you want to see the fruit. So yeah, it kind of is like a nice cheat sheet. So it says early tip pinching, thinning. I go to the next page, which is page 115. Continue with Arctostaphylos, and it tells you more pruning options. It has directional or formal pruning, which is kind of the heading cut, reduction cut thing, and not, we don't use that term in the class, but it's kind of the same thing. So formal pruning, just like kind of more around shaping. And then you have hedging, coppicing, raising, mowing as the next pruning options. So again, you can see Arctostaphylos, there are varieties that can be hedged, and then raising and lifting is a thing. And then the following columns all refer to basically last lecture, IPM, so pest, common pests associated with this plant. So Arctostaphylos, this is what the special consideration on the slide is referring to. If you look at Arctostaphylos, it says it's susceptible to root rot and branch dieback, which typically are fungal diseases. So this whole little worksheet I really wanted to highlight because it just really is kind of like everything you need in a little data sheet form or whatever. So yeah, that's Arctostaphylos. we're gonna do Ceanothus. So I would go to page, let's see, Ceanothus is on page 113. You got to go back a little bit. And same, if you look at the description for Ceanothus, it says, leaf drop is typical with the onset of first hard summer heat waves. Don't add extra water to combat this natural occurrence. If anything, refrain from overwatering this chaparral shrub in summer. And then prune it in spring after blooms to control size and to increase lateral branching for a denser look if desired. So again, it's just going to tell you the main takeaway points that you need to know for this plant. And if I follow this through further, it says it confirms pruning season spring, which is usually after they flower. And you can see here on this slide, reasons to prune would be for shaping, hedging, edging, depending on your the cultivar variety you're using. And tip pinch, like it suggests in the description here, to remove old flower clusters and shear to a hedge if you have a hedge. Again, it really depends on the form you're trying to create and what is the goal of the garden. I think, wait, I wanted to see if there's anything else for, yeah, so Ceanothus, if I go to the columns that talk about pruning methods, it says early tip pinching, thinning, deadheading, which all makes sense because it says we're supposed to tip pinch to remove old flower clusters, which is tip pinch or deadhead. It's kind of achieving the same thing here. And then it's got checked mark, directional, formal pruning, hedging, raising, and anyway, the special consideration makes sense. It says do not cut into branches that are larger around than a pencil, so in diameter, to avoid fungal infection, and that makes sense because it's susceptible to root rot and branch dieback, which is stated in this data sheet. So some special things to think about. So I kind of feel like these slides are almost the, what's it called? Like this slide is kind of the more expanded version is your data sheet. So same with sages, there's so many different ones. It really depends on what you are trying to do with it. Is it a ground cover? What is it? If I go to the sage entry, which is under salvia, that's on page 121. It, like first thing says, tip prune sages early on to avoid crown splitting. So we've talked about that, really important. Tip prune sages early on to avoid crown splitting. Sages are generally low maintenance, but do best if deadheaded in late summer. So you can see on the slide, it says season late summer, that makes sense. You can reduce their size by 1/3 annually. White sage, and then yada yada goes on to something about white sage. But I just want you guys to know that that exists and that this is such a great little resource that was provided by Theodore Payne. Sages, typically the Cleveland sage we talked about, you could cut it back 30 to even 50% in winter. So you might deadhead, to remove the dead seed heads, but if you want to do the heading back cuts, that would be more in winter for Cleveland sage. And then like the purple, black sage, Munz's sage, those kind of things would be similar, like a 1/2 to 1/4 of the, you can cut back in fall or late, almost winter. So let's see. I went over that. Let me see my time. We're at 6:40. We do have a video, which I'm not sure if I might have to share my screen appropriately. Let's do, well, I didn't do the poll, but just as like take a breather. As just kind of like a thought, it was a poll, but I have it written down because I didn't get it loaded to, I didn't send it early enough to get it loaded to the thing. But maybe if you guys just can listen and I'll give you the multiple choices and just kind of, I just want you guys to think about kind of a scenario and how you would approach it for pruning. So here I'm gonna just, I'll read you my little note card, which is a client has expressed the importance of their native garden providing habitat and food for birds and wildlife. They have a large 5-year-old toyon grown as a hedge. It is late summer and there are a bunch of spent flowers all over it. When do you think it would be the best time to prune this toyon? And I'm going to give you 3 options. One would be immediately, like in summer. We're pretending we're in summer. B would be wait a couple months until fall. And then last would be wait until late winter or early spring. Does anyone have a kind of idea about that? So when would we prune this toyon that has spent flowers on it in summer? it is currently summer is what we're pretending for the scenario. And the owner really likes, wants to provide bird habitat and wildlife food and habitat. Anyone want to chime in?
The late winter, early spring,
Yeah, why do you say that?
because they're a great source of, the berries are a great source of color from the fall to the spring. And so that's when the birds want to eat them.
Exactly. So thank you. I'm glad it makes sense. But yeah, this though would be the exception to that rule of like most of our evergreen stuff, you prune after flowering. So yeah, basically early spring, winter, I'm sorry, winter is when they're putting on all those showy red fruits that the birds are eating. And if you need to prune them again, you could just prune, like maybe it's winter and all the fruit hasn't fallen off, but they want them pruned or something, or you know, you aren't going to have another chance to prune it and it needs work for the hedge or something. You could just prune off the fruit sometime in as late as winter or early spring as you can get, and just leave it on the ground and the birds can eat it there. So yeah, that's I think I have a couple more slides. Oh, right. I always forget these like last ones, which are the like kind of fee-based pruning work stuff that you could do. One is just annual tree pruning. You could potentially note the large trees on a property and just make a proposal to a client to say like, hey, here's your annual cleanup. I'm going to be certified in the way I do it, and that I'll have kind of healthy healthy pruning practices, and you know, doing what's best for the plant's health, and you know, responsible waste removal and pruning outside of like the bird nesting season, which is typically I think from February 1st to like August 31st. If you prune in either like sometime in fall or early winter, you're usually fine. And typically with bird nesting season, you're thinking mostly trees, though they do make nests in smaller shrub or large shrubs. What is the Oh, I was going to say oaks, though. Well, oak is a Quercus agrifolia, the coast live oak, does have restrictions and limitations. You can't cut anything with an 8-inch diameter of coast live oak without a permit. I learned that. I think Catherine talked about that last class. So that's not something you can just go cutting willy nilly. And then lastly, there's the fire zone modification. So yeah, basically with the fire zones, anyone on that interface of the wild part with like suburban or urban development obviously is in a kind of unsafe fire zone, and there's concerns about it, and there's plenty of local restrictions about those areas. And you might want to consider offering some kind of fire zone pruning or fire zone modification to those types of areas in people's yards that have them, because if you don't prune them, then basically those maintenance crews are subcontracted from like local fire agencies, and they just clear it. You know, they're just like, it's brush, and they just clear it with no regard for the plant health or aesthetics or anything like that. So it's potentially like a liability issue, I think, but you could at least offer it in terms of an option for kind of fire zone pruning. I mean, honestly, I don't think I'm gonna not even test my like internet today. I think what I'll do is I'll put it in the chat, this this video. It's only 2 minutes long, guys. It's from LEDWP. It has a little bit more, it's just a little short video on pruning for health. And I will put it in the chat once I stop sharing my screen. But yeah, I think this will get a little more to the techniques, especially if you can't go to the workshop. You know, like cutting specifically and where it's got nice visuals of it. What was I going to say about that? I think that's it with the LEDWP thing. So yeah, I'll share that in the chat because I don't even want to risk. Oops, now it's going to play anyway. There we go. Okay. Before I get to the homework, I just wanted to say, I didn't have it with me because I was in such a like flustered moment, but in addition to this data sheet as a resource, I really recommend either Carol Bornstein's book, what the blue Cicerantiums on them, the California native plants for the garden. That one has a lot of like pruning tips in there, or the care and maintenance of Southern California native plant gardens Care and Maintenance of Southern California Native Plant Gardens. Yes, that one's great. It was put out by Theodore Payne, CNPS, and the Santa Ana Botanic Garden, which is now something else. Anyway, they put out this lovely, really more nuanced guide that has like a lot of this lecture and more in it, and it's bilingual. So each page has both Spanish and English if you want to freshen up on your Spanish, or if you just want to know the words for some of these techniques in Spanish. That's a great resource. I'm pretty sure Theodore Payne still sells it, but I don't know. So homework.
That book is unavailable. If you can find it online, it's a couple $100.
Oh, wow, really? You know where you can get it sometimes is the California Native Plant Societies. If they have meetings, they tend to have little like kind of book fair type things, and they typally have copies of it. I've seen.
Yes, buy it.
But buy it
if you
can
see it,
grab
buy it. Yeah,
It's
definitely.
great. So homework, I'll go through this quickly. Of course, my battery on my computer is now getting low, and I'm in a place where I don't have my battery with me. So if I die, I love you guys, and I'm just kidding. Anyway, the homework is sort the flashcards into groups with similar pruning needs. This is the official homework. Again, I'm going to do this change up, which it says use your maintenance handout, which is the thing I went over in class to assist with sorting. If you want to do that, and then just send me kind of email me the lists of the kind of groups that you've created that have similar pruning needs, and what are those pruning needs and why are they similar type thing. You don't have to necessarily say why, but just grouping them and maybe just a short list of plants that you have, that's fine. However, if you want to, you can also assess a native plant and determine its best course of pruning given its condition and aesthetic. I'm just offering this as an option if you find it more helpful. It's like that thing that yoga teachers say, like, take what is helpful and leave the rest, you know, like whichever of these homework feels more helpful to you or easiest for whatever situation you're in. I just thought that if it were me, I would really like to just practice looking at a plant and then kind of give like kind of come up with a plan for its pruning. So you would, in that case, take a picture of it and kind of explain to me what you are thinking in terms of pruning based off of, use again your maintenance handout or whatever resources you have, and explain to me that if you want to take advantage of that. But the official homework that's on your outline and here is the grouping it into grouping the flashcards into groups. So, I'm gonna stop my share and share that video. Please guys watch it. So I don't feel like I left you all hanging. Oh no, I'm really on zero battery guys. So I might get cut out here. Let's see if I wonder if I have a battery. I'm just gonna jump up, see if I have it. No, I don't. Okay, I'm really truly on zero. So I'll try to put it.
I think we lost Claire.
It
But
looked
she
like
loves
it.
us, but you know, it's all good. 10 minutes left. Hopefully she'll make it back. If not, that's okay. Earlier in the chat, I posted the link for the workshop. So if you haven't already done that, please sign up. And again, Henry, if you can hear me, I need to know what your name is so that I can give you credit for being in the class. I don't know who you are. Yeah, I think Emerson left too, so we don't have any other backup for the video. Okay.
Maybe
Which
you can
video
send
are
it
you
on the
is she
link
talking?
later as in the email blast to us?
I can send the recording, but it's recording what we have now. I wouldn't have a way to upload the video unless Claire sends it. So we can try it, and if it doesn't work, well, you know, hopefully you'll be able to attend the in-person workshop. We'll go over a lot of the techniques that she went over in the class.
Okay, great.
Michelle, I see that you'd answered. I have a Michelle Henry and I have a Henry Versalis. If that's the same person, cool. But I'm looking specifically for Henry Brasales. Okay. Pardon me. Okay, well, we have 8 minutes. I say let's just call it.
I just have a question about the workshop or the,
Uh-huh.